Now we will talk about the other most important carboxylic acid derivatives, the amides. Now, as we mentioned before, amides are the most stable acid derivatives because the nitrogen that's attached to the carbonyl can donate its lone pair of electrons to stabilize the carbonyl. And the proton that is attached to the nitrogen is not very acidic, with a pKa value of 16, around 16. So they are much weaker than the carboxylic acid, again because of nitrogen being less electronegative. And this pKa value is comparable to that of water or alcohols. Amides are very important because, for one reason, penicillin as antibiotics will have amides in its structure. So the structure shown here is penicillin G. In this structure, there are two amide functional groups present. One is outside the ring, the other is inside a four-membered ring. So we have a cyclic amide here, and the activity of antibiotics for penicillin actually relate to this four-membered ring lactam. So previously, when we talk about the lactones, we've mentioned the gamma lactones and the delta lactones. Those are the 5-membered ring and the 6-membered ring cyclic esters. We will have the similar lactam. 5-membered ring lactam will be called gamma lactam, and the 6-membered ring delta. For the 4-membered ring lactam, as in penicillin, we will call it beta lactam. The nitrogen that is attached to the beta carbon of the carbonyl forms the amide linkage. The second reason that amides are important is because they also appear in biopolymers, such as peptides and proteins. Okay, peptides and proteins are polymers of amino acids, and they link together through the amide linkage. We will talk more about this in the amino acids and the proteins chapter. Now let's take a look at preparation of amides. So in amides, there are two parts. One part is from the carboxyl group. The other one is from the nitrogen-containing part. So let's talk about the nitrogen-containing part first. We can use ammonia, NH3, to prepare amides, and it's going to be a primary amide when the nitrogen is attached to only one carbon. If we use a primary amine to make amides, we will make a secondary amide. The nitrogen in the amides here will be attached to two carbon atoms. And if we use secondary amine to make amides, then we will have a tertiary amine. Both secondary and tertiary amides, okay? Both secondary and tertiary amides are substituted amides. All right? So now let's focus on the carboxyl part. Amides can be made from the carboxylic acid derivatives that are more reactive. And we know all the other carboxylic acid derivatives are more reactive than amides, right? So amides can be made from acyl chlorides, from acid anhydride, and from esters. So let's take a look at the first two now, because they have something in common. When we use acyl chloride to make amides, the byproduct will be HCl, which is an acid. When we use acid anhydride to make amides, the byproduct will be a carboxylic acid. It's also an acid. So, in a reaction, we will need two equivalent of the amine or ammonia, because one equivalent will be the nucleophile to make the amide, and the other one will serve as the base to neutralize the acid byproduct. So let's see an example here. So we start with, in this case, a secondary amine and an acyl chloride. The secondary amine will attack on the carbonyl carbon in the nucleophilic acyl substitution. Then the chloride leaves and it gives the amide, right? So I'm not going to go through the mechanism. You should know this already. And the byproduct initially is HCl. HCl is an acid, and amine will be a base. So the acid-base reaction will take place here, that amine will grab the proton from HCl to form an amine salt. That's why we need the two equivalent of the amine. Similarly, if we use acid anhydride to prepare amide, the byproduct will be a carboxylic acid, which can react with amine. So it's going to form a salt, an ammonium carboxylate salt. And the acid-base reaction after the amide is formed will drive the reaction forward. So let's see a specific example here. We have an acyl chloride, and we have a secondary cyclic amine. Those two will react together in the presence of sodium hydroxide. The product will be an amide. And in this particular case, only one equivalent of the secondary amine is needed, because we have added sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide can be used to neutralize the acid byproduct. Okay, so if our amine is very expensive, is very precious, we don't want to waste any amine to form the amine salt, then we can add another base. All right, and the amides can be prepared from esters. So when the amine react with an ester, amide will be formed, and the byproduct will be an alcohol. And this should be a very straightforward reaction. In the nucleophilic acyl substitution, the tetrahedron intermediate collapses. Amide is more stable. That's why we form amide as the product in this case. And lastly, all the acid derivatives can be made from the acid, right? So amine can be made from the carboxylic acids. When we first mix the carboxylic acid and the amine, amines are the bases and the carboxylic acids are the esters. So the first reaction that's going to take place will also be an acid-base reaction. It will form the amine carboxylate salt first. And after this salt is formed, and when we heat the reaction, dehydration reaction will take place, and the amide is formed as the final product. All right, so I just want to give you this sense that whenever an acid-base reaction is possible, that's the first reaction that will take place. Okay, further reaction will happen after the acid-base exchange. So let's see a specific example when we have benzoic acid and aniline react with each other. What will be the product when it's heated to above 200 degrees Celsius? It should give an amide, right? So I gave you all the names. The product, the amide, will be called N-phenyl benzamide.